The big question on my mind was whether or not the jury was going to sort of succumb to the pressure of the mob and end up being hung. But clearly, I think anyway, if you looked at the facts in this case and the evidence as how it was presented, clearly the prosecution did not meet their burden. They did not prove beyond a reasonable doubt that Kyle Rittenhouse was not acting in self-defense. This is a textbook case of self-defense, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we have been kind of talking about whether or not it would go in favor of the defense here. You saw right as the verdict was about to be read that it was a unanimous decision for all charges. It was just going to be one charge, and it ended up being not guilty. There was a moment there where I feel like the defense thought it was going to go in the opposite direction.
Yeah, a lot of the times when juries reach a verdict, there's something known as a compromise verdict, meaning everyone's been deliberating. They couldn't come to a unanimous verdict on all the charges. So what they do is they'll convict on one count, usually a lesser count, and acquit on the top counts. But here, it was clear that the jury, in my opinion, did the right thing because, like I said, this is a textbook case of self-defense. People came at him with deadly force, and he responded by defending himself with, unfortunately, deadly force.
Yeah. What do you think the prosecution is thinking right now? They've said that they're not going to release any statements or reaction to the verdict.
I mean, I think the prosecution probably had an inkling that this might be coming, and they really overstepped their bounds several times. They mischaracterized witness testimony during closing arguments. They made comment on, Mr. Rittenhouse's Fifth Amendment right to remain silent. They tried to introduce evidence that was the subject of pretrial rulings that was not allowed in. So they did a lot of things that crossed the line. And, I think they crossed those lines because maybe that was the only way that they could obtain a conviction here.
Ken, there's been talks of possible federal charges being brought against Kyle Rittenhouse. Do you think that there is a future for Kyle in court again?
I do think there's a future for Kyle in court again. I think it's going to come in the form of several things. I think, number one, just like O.J. Simpson, I'm not comparing Kyle Rittenhouse to O.J. Simpson at all, but, just as an example that's in the popular lexicon, O.J. Simpson, as we all know, was acquitted, whatever your feelings of that may be, but was later found liable in a civil wrongful death suit for the death of Nicole Brown, or what Mr. Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson. But the reality is here, Kyle Rittenhouse could be the subject of some wrongful death suits on behalf of the deceased relatives. Also, I think, which is probably coming down the pike, is that Kyle Rittenhouse is going to find him on the prosecuting end of a large amount of defamation cases. I mean, it's well known that the president himself characterized Mr. Rittenhouse as a white supremacist and a murderer. We've had all sorts of politicians commenting on this case. And I want to emphasize something here. I think it is wholly inappropriate for elected officials to be commenting on defendants in criminal cases. Regardless of your feelings of a case or a defendant, they are constitutionally entitled to a presumption of innocence. And when elected officials go on the record condemning these people before a trial has been had, when they're only at the stage that they've been charged, it's totally inappropriate. And it inflames the mob. It provokes outrage by people. And I think it's going to probably lead to riots in this country.
So you were saying, I want to go back to that first point, that Kyle Rittenhouse could be on the prosecution side with these defamation suits, not only against the president, but against other people as well.
I mean, all sorts of media outlets, I think, portrayed him in a defamatory light as some right-wing, extremist, someone who went there with the intent to kill people, someone who's a white supremacist. That doesn't appear to be the case. And you can't just go on national television, whether you're a politician or a media figure, and lie about a member of the public and destroy their reputation. This kid, Mr. Rittenhouse, and he is a kid, he's 18 years old, he's going to be living with this for the rest of his life, not to mention the trauma of having had to kill two people in the course of self-defense.
All right, Ken Belkin, do you have any last thoughts on this? What comes next for Mr. Rittenhouse?
I think Mr. Rittenhouse, needs to go home and be very thankful this Thanksgiving and spend it with his family.
Yeah, and that he will, I'm sure. We do want to go into some of that reaction from President Biden that we were talking about a little bit earlier. Let's listen into what he had to say. Very, very brief remarks. Take a listen.
Yes. Do you have any reactions to the Kyle Rittenhouse verdict?
I just heard a moment ago.
Do you have any reactions?
I didn't watch the trial, so
Do you stand by your past comment equating him to white supremacy?
Well, look, I stand by what the jury has concluded. The jury system works, and we have to abide by it.
Sir, what is the state of your health, sir? What is the state of your health after this exam today?
Good.
Okay, so the president being asked about some of those remarks about Kyle Rittenhouse, him calling him supposedly a white supremacist. He didn't really answer fully to that, but stood by that the jury did what they needed to do today in a separate statement, which we'll be getting into later in the evening. But I do want to go out live to Kenosha, Wisconsin, outside of the courthouse right now. Angelica Sanchez joining us now. Angelica, we have talked to you every single day of this trial. The verdict coming out tonight. Give us the latest.
Well, the prosecution has issued a statement saying that they accept the verdict and that they want the public to respect it as well. The defense in this case saying they do believe they were given a fair trial, but they have some issues with the way the state prosecuted this case. The verdict heard around the world. 18-year-old Kyle Rittenhouse is a free man. He was visibly overcome with emotion as a 12-person jury found him not guilty. The most serious charges against him, carrying a life sentence.
He has to get on with his life the best he can. I think eventually some anonymity will come back to it.
Defense attorney Mark Richards told reporters he feels they were given a fair trial.
It was a case about self-defense.
Over the course of 3.5 days, the jury weighed charges against him, a first-degree reckless homicide for the shooting death of Joseph Rosenbaum, followed by 2 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety, first-degree intentional homicide for the shooting death of Anthony Huber, and attempted first-degree intentional homicide for shooting and injuring Gage Grosskreutz. The prosecution added lesser-included offenses to the charges related to Huber and Grosskreutz. They also added provocation to the jury instructions. Richards says they are disappointed with the way the state handled this case.
Changing your prosecution, going with provocation after you say that my client chased him down and shot him in the back, calling him an active shooter when he's not. Justice is done when the truth is reached, and I don't know that it's set up to do that, but a prosecutor is supposed to seek the truth. It's not about winning, and this case became about winning.
The prosecution did not speak on camera. In a statement, the Kenosha County District Attorney says, "We respect the jury verdict based on 3.5 days of careful deliberations. Certainly, issues regarding the privilege of self-defense remain highly contentious in our current times. We ask that all members of the public accept the verdicts peacefully and not resort to violence." Now, all the jurors in this case were escorted outside the courthouse through a side entrance. They were heavily guarded by sheriff's deputies. Many jurors that I saw were actually covering their faces. None of them were answering any questions that were presented to them by the media. Reporting live outside the Kenosha County Courthouse, Angelica Sanchez, back to you.
Angelica, a couple follow-up questions for you. Are there any protesters near or at the courthouse right now?
Very quiet right now outside the courthouse. Earlier, obviously, when that verdict was read, there was a lot of reaction and emotion happening from both sides, people cheering, some people very disappointed with the outcome of this case. But at least for right now, I can tell you it is very calm outside the Kenosha County Courthouse.
And since you were there, we're sitting here in the studio, we're seeing what's going on inside of the courtroom there, but we have rehashed this every single day that the energy is just different when you're there in person. Since you were there, describe that for us. What was that moment like when it was officially read that he would be not guilty on all charges?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I can tell you that, sometimes as a reporter, you don't necessarily want to channel what other people are feeling in the moment. But I can tell you, when we knew this verdict was coming down, there was just this moment of intensity and tension but that I know my colleagues described inside the courtroom. And I can tell you in the media room where I was stationed for a lot of my reporting, there was a moment where everybody was just bracing. What was this jury going to bring down as a verdict? And then, once we heard what happened, once we learned this verdict, there was like a collective, and I think that this entire city, even this county, tensions have been high surrounding this trial. We spoke to law enforcement who are local here, and they say that, tensions boiled over. There were several arrests that were made outside of this courthouse in relation to this trial where people are arguing with each other. So I think the entire city and the county of Kenosha is going to breathe a lot easier now knowing that this trial is over.
Yeah, and that's the main hope tonight, right? That everything stays peaceful outside of the courthouse in Kenosha in general and Milwaukee, nearby areas. That's what we want, not more violence.
Yeah. Absolutely, and I can tell you that the National Guard is still on standby. I haven't seen any reports saying that they are not on standby. So again, while things are very calm, the National Guard is still on standby here in Wisconsin.
Okay, again, Fox 6's Angelica Sanchez. Angelica, I just want to formally thank you for your reporting there on the ground. Like we said, we talk to you every day, and you've just done a great job. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.